Hi, I'm now going to continue talking about the prince that was promised and the three heads of the dragon. And I'm first going to try and cover whether or not they are linked to Azor Ahai and to what extent they are. The prince that was promised hasn't been spoken about in as much detail as Azor Ahai. In fact, we've mainly only heard about it in any kind of detail from Rhaegar and Aemon, and briefly from Melisandre. And where this comes from is in, I think it's Storm Swords, where Melisandre has got to the wall of Stannis and is asked by Aemon, where's the prince that was promised, and she says something along the lines of, he stands before you, stands beareth down, is Azor Ahai reborn, although you haven't got the eyes to see it, or words very close to that. So that would seem to suggest that Melisandre certainly thinks they're the same. Now, Aemon doesn't say very much about that at the time, but later he does. And it's when he's very clearly dying and he's raving slightly, but he still says something rather key, I think. If you permit me, I'll read it to you. And he says, no one ever looked for a girl. It was a prince that was promised, not a princess. Rhaegar, I thought, the smoke from the fire that devoured Summerhall on the day of his birth, the salt from the tears that were shed for those who died. And he then goes on to talk about Aegon being the prince that was promised in the eyes of Rhaegar, because there was a comet in the sky on the night he was born, and that in Rhaegar's opinion the bleeding red star was a comet. Now, that to me says that Aemon, who certainly seems to know what he's talking about, thinks they are essentially the same. The confusion slightly comes when we hear things from Rhaegar's point of view, when he says of Aegon, his is the song of ice and fire, that the dragon must have three heads. Now, my interpretation of all this is that the prince that was promised and Azor Ahai reborn are the same person, but that either Azor Ahai reborn must have two sidekicks, or that actually they're three aspects of the same character. Now, the first thing to cover here is the subtle difference between what Aemon and Rhaegar think, or certainly thought, and what Melisandre thinks. In that the Targaryens seem to be of the belief that the word reborn is reborn in the sense of incarnation, because all Aemon and Rhaegar's references are to the process of birth. So the moment the child is born, that is Azor Ahai being reborn as such. Melisandre doesn't seem to think the same thing. She seems to think it more in the sense of someone is alive and then goes through a rebirth process. Now, my personal feeling is that for all their knowledge and wisdom, Aemon and Rhaegar were possibly wrong. And Melisandre, of course, is of the R'hllor faith, and it is the R'hllor faith which is to do with Azor Ahai, and the Valyrian faith has nothing to do with it. So that's one possible interpretation. However, this is where my thought about the three heads not just being sidekicks but also being aspects of Azor Ahai comes in that I think it's possible that two of the three heads could be reborn in the sense that Rhaegar and Aemon thought, or they could be reborn in the sense that Melisandre thought, or they could have nothing to do with it. Now, going through the first two possibilities, it could be the case that of the 5 candidates to be Azor Ahai earlier, it's 3 of them, and in my opinion the most likely would be Daenerys to be one of them. And Aemon certainly thinks that she is one of them, and that of the other 4, 2 of them are the 3 heads. Or it could be the case that what we are led to believe is Rhaegal's opinion is partially correct, and that it's been suggested that Rhaegal believed that his 3 children will be the 3 heads, Rhaenys, Aegon, and Jon. And of course this theory is mainly proposed by those who also believe in R plus L equals J, and that the only one he was actually wrong about was Rhaenys. And this all comes from someone suggesting that could baby Aegon have been substituted, babies looking a lot like each other unless you know the individual baby very well, and Gregor Clegane not being overly endowed in the brain department might not have been able to tell. So Aegon was safely away when he turned up, and Rhaenys was slain. This was confirmed by George R. R. Martin when he was asked, are Rhaegal's children definitely dead? And he said, where's the effect of it? Rhaenys was definitely pulled from under her bed and slain, and then said nothing about Aegon, which of course made everyone think, oh, maybe he's still alive. So it's possible that Rhaegal was only wrong about Rhaenys, and the other 3 heads are in fact Daenerys, Rhaenys, and Jon. Or he could have been wrong entirely, and that none of his children are involved, and it's only people who meet Azor Ahai. Or it's partially those who meet Azor Ahai and partially his children, and so on and so on and so on. And it's at this point that it all becomes rather foggy, in that we don't actually know very much about the 3 heads in the terms of the prophecy. All we know is that Azor Ahai is a prophecy to be fulfilled. The prince that was promised appears to be one to be fulfilled that's linked very strongly to it, and the prince that was promised must have 3 heads. The problem is that we don't know anything about the 3 heads bit, and it can become progressively more confusing as you look at different aspects, because of course Dany's got 3 dragons. Well, how do they fit in? Must the 3 heads ride them? Because of course that would bring us into all sorts of things like, oh, only Targaryens can ride them, or people of Valyrian descent, and there's only certain people along those lines. And then you've got the thought that, oh, what about skin changing? Well, that would bring in Bran, and even if he's not son of Rhaegal, perhaps Jon as well, because he's had skin changing experience with ghosts, etc. But then of course that leads into the thought that when you're skin changing, you're not in control of your body, so you couldn't ride it, but because you're in control of it, anyone else could, and so on and so on and so on. And at this point I'm going to cut a line right under that speculation, because I don't think we know anywhere near enough about the 3 heads to speculate as to who they are. It's fun, and it's a nice idea that we could be injecting anyone into the scenario. What about Tyrion with his dragon obsession? It'd be really nice to see him riding a dragon. Or Gendry, he's Baratheon, so he's got Valyrian blood. What about him? But we don't know. And we won't know until George tells us. And the only people who know are George and anyone he's told, who won't be telling us anytime soon, I'm willing to bet. So I think we can conclude that we've got no idea who the 3 heads are, but that they are linked to Azor Ahai, because they are aspects of the prince that was promised. And that we're going to have to wait and be patient to be told. And I think that's the end of my thinkings on it. I hope I've made that as clear as possible. It's quite confusing. I've got a few more ideas for videos like this, but I'm welcome to suggestions. So tell me what you think, and I hope to see you again soon. Thanks for watching.